Putin is provoking Trump, and Trump has appointed Tucker Carlson as White House press secretary, reflecting appointments in the future cabinet of the 47th President of the United States. Today we are talking about this with Sergey ASLANYAN, a journalist and host of the Khodorkovsky Life program. Sergey, hello.
Good evening.
Our broadcast is now taking place on YouTube, so I ask our viewers, please join us, like this broadcast, of course, write your questions in the chat, your opinion about our conversation with Sergey. Well, for you, Sergey, I have my first question. Tucker Carlson, who interviewed Putin, will now become the White House press secretary. How do you assess such an appointment?
This is always a very interesting competition, whose press secretary is mysterious, non-standard, original, and in general, there was no such position, for example, at the Soviet court. There was always either a minister or some abstract piece of paper, like TASS is authorized to declare. Then the Americans instilled this fashion on Russian soil and began to surprise with all sorts of their press secretaries, with whom some gender nuances and intrigues are associated. And some presidents were even about to resign, because they had something like that happening there. And then such special young ladies of a wide profile began to appear, who on behalf of the White House told something to the whole world. Russia picked up this initiative. The disease turned out to be contagious. But, unfortunately, it ended with the drug addict Masha Zakharova, who poses a danger to people's health and even more so threatens with political complications. When such a person is from a seemingly whole state, no matter what she says, even if she is silent, this is in principle a threat to public safety, not to mention the international situation. And now this exchange of slaps continues, because, in principle, anyone can be a press secretary. This is not an independent figure, this is a stand for a microphone. The stand can be, for example, beautiful. It may be like Dory's fish, single-celled, but if it looks good, then it basically copes with its function as a faucet from which something pours. But when it comes to Tucker Carlson, it just shows that the future president, who has not yet taken office, Trump, can afford to mock Putin so exquisitely. And in general, given that he knows how to regularly change this deck, he has other more key positions there for life. He can take it off in a month or 6 months. But the first attempt on this topic, magnificent, is just like that immediately with an oar and head-on. Because this is not subtle diplomacy. It would be possible to take something neutral and put some impudent text into the mouth of this neutral. But when this figure of Carlson, about whom few people in Russia have heard, because you never know how many of these Carlsons live on the roof, we know, they have a motor. After all, this is a foreign policy topic, and it is clear all over the world that this is trolling. It's very elegant, it's very ironic, and it's absolutely unambiguous. And for Putin, this is a reason to at least reconsider Masha Zakharova and put Miss Universe in this position, but given that Trump, in principle, is greedy. And how can this position, this appointment, be blocked? But only in an equally unexpected move. And then exchange your attacks like this, changing press secretaries. Function itself, since it does not imply any personal characteristics, diction, height, color, weight. There are no other parameters. Well, and also a certain photogenicity. It doesn't matter that it's Carlson. It is important what his last name is.
It matters. It is important that it was not Masha Zakharova. Therefore, according to the characteristics that you say, it does not fit a little.
Masha Zakharova does not fit for anything. I am afraid that in her main area of activity as the main drinking companion of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, she is no longer able to cope with her duties.
Yes, that's for sure, you know, but nevertheless, if we're serious, Putin supposedly wants negotiations and tells every free journalist about it, but at the same time, last week the Russian state TV channel ROSSIYA1 started talking about a naked Melania Trump in the 2000s. Where she was filmed for a magazine, I think, and Q or JQ. Yes, this is also a kind of provocation on the part of Russia. It cannot be said that Skobeva and Popov decided to show photos of Melania Trump in her youth.
There is no reason to expect from Russia the noble intelligentsia, educated refinement and refined presentation. The country of gopniks. If criminals sit at the very top, then why should they suddenly depart from the usual stereotypes? They have a deck of cards. This is evening leisure. The most important one even has an aqua disco with a pole. This speaks of his incredible intellectual sophistication. But because this is what kind of aesthetics? After you ruled empires, read Leo Tolstoy's For the Night once again, and even looked at some Masha Zakharova, who was depicting something on this pole, trying not to fall. And in this completely normal scenario for Russia, of course, there is always something with a three-letter word on the fence, something so genitally entertaining, and even more so such a brilliant opportunity not to forgive Trump, the most beautiful woman on planet Earth. Well, accordingly, Russia allows itself not to pretend to be intelligent, decent and generally worthy. She is like this, here she was in bast shoes, here she was with a fix, here she was with brass knuckles, so she remains. Therefore, it is very important for Russia here, in this case, not to play with itself, but to declare it right away. Putin, who came to the throne, promising to kill everyone in the toilet, and not in the toilet or lavatory, is still very understandable to the people when he has a grin, a moronic grin, like the people love it, because if anything, eat Patrobulkin's brother on the facts, look, here he is our president. That is, Russia, that's what it is. When Russia is told that it now has the second most powerful supercomputer in the world, the space program, that Russia is a country of writers, it is actually, look at what Melania Trump is.
Yes, you know, but at the same time I would like to talk about Trump's appointments, and about the fact that now a Trump cabinet is gradually emerging, and Musk and Roma with you will become the head of one of the newly created departments of state efficiency.
He was already afraid of Trump and paid him more than $100 million, because Trump said that electric cars are absurd, there should be no electric cars, you need to drive on gasoline. And that's why Vance, the future vice president, said that anybody who buys a four-door, four-cylinder, four-wheel car in America gets $4,000 from the state budget, because we're only going to support internal combustion engines, never electric cars. For Musk, this is a delicate moment. And Musk, who is now at court, in office, he had already asked Trump for a favor even before his appointment, and could Trump appoint several of his employees to the Department of Defense, including Elon Musk. He has good guys, they will perfectly provide Elon Musk's defense with an order. This is a direct conflict of interest. The application that, upon taking office, immediately get favorable positions in the distribution of finances in his favor, suggests that Musk could not be appointed anywhere. Under no circumstances. Because here is a conflict of interest between Elon Musk and the administration, politics and economics. It is completely different. And since he was taken, it means that he was heavily indebted. And Trump, who creates a Trump for him, creates a department for him, comes up with something to do with this person, apparently owes him much more than the $100 million appearing in the press. Elon Musk himself was, until recently, the most progressive person on planet Earth. Elon Musk invented and brought his ideas to life. In terms of its power, it was probably close to Tesla, whose surname it took as a brand for its electric vehicles. Because Tesla knew a lot of intimate things about the world, another thing is that he was not so effective in terms of money, but he was definitely effective in terms of ingenuity. Elon Musk was, until recently, incredible. He could do anything, he took on anything, he succeeded in everything. In order to understand how much any polished metal can hide a rather cloudy, worn out and not so ceremonial reverse side, You can understand by looking at how in the first marriage, Musk's children received human names, and the subsequent children, the entire next litter of Elon Musk, received monstrous combinations of numbers and letters that have nothing to do with names. That is, the characteristic is nonlinear. This is not a rocket that constantly follows the right trajectory and says that you need to quietly deviate from the course. This suggests that we have the right to expect perfection from a person, but he has no right to live up to our expectations. And little by little, it is now descending from orbit. And now, losing his mind, in front of everyone's eyes, Elon Musk, behind whom there is a trail of reputation, magnificent, brilliant, applauding, charming Trump, ascends the throne and begins to rule something in the state. In its current state, in my opinion, it is very dangerous. Not only because now he will pull the blanket over himself, not only because in the near future we will be honored with a fairly obvious corruption scandal, in which, unfortunately, Elon Musk will be the main defendant, but also because the administration is built on the basis of personal preferences, as well as personal financial obligations of the president of the future, who will be president only on January 20th. Not because it is expedient, not because they are specialists, not because they are people capable of solving problems, but simply because the future president owes them a lot. This suggests that the administration will be ineffective and it will be very eclectic and as scandalous as possible. For America, this is normal. America, in principle, lives with internal problems. And Ukraine is not considered here. America generally looks down on the rest of the world, well, like from Olympus. Well, of course, that down there, at the foot of Olympus, there are some people, they have some problems. And we are here on Olympus, gods, what is our profession? Well, to deal with, among other things, these human problems. Sometimes we go down from Olympus and decide something like that there. But in general, our most important life is on Olympus. And here is America, it is just like that. America for Americans, America for Americans, America for Americans. And if America, for example, wanted to solve all other geopolitical problems, and it is still the #1 country for planet Earth, she really knows how to solve them. When America needs it, it is able, among other things, to end world wars. Well, she can really start them, but she ends them really dashingly, both the First World War and the Second World War. At the same time, America has a huge number of conflicts and problems that seem to affect it directly geographically. Canada is the only peaceful place. Mexico is no more. South America, Central America, also not. Will anyone do the US for this? Well, you think, Honduras is there. Well, you think, somewhere in Venezuela, some psychopath, once again a bus driver, exchanged himself as the winner not only in the socialist competition, but also in the presidential elections, and now rules his country in such a way that it is not at all clear how to live there. So what? And this happens all the time. And it would seem that if America cares about everything, it would solve, among other things, on the principle of geographical proximity, the most acute problems that may resonate with it. For example, a wave of very serious emigration, when people flee from Venezuela to America, when they flee from Mexico to America. To do this, the United States is just building a fence. They say, let's eventually link assistance to Ukraine with our Mexican problem, the border. That is, there is political maneuvering, which in fact hides the absence of any very serious thoughtful policy. I don't care about Ukraine, it's far away. I don't even care about Mexico, although it's nearby. And when, with such an attitude, with such, in principle, normal life in America, when only what is happening inside the country is interesting. Trump, as a president who is primarily interested in the American economy, American business, financial flows within America, he is also not a strategist of planet Earth in order to solve the problems of Ukraine. And he assembles his administration from people who will now tear this patchwork quilt to pieces with their teeth. And he will do what he loves. Trump is very fond of such intrigues. He is beautiful in them. At the same time, he is quite straightforward in this regard. And he is very good at stunning his opponents with such decisions when the crowbar flies right into your forehead. Quite strange for a politician, but quite typical for a cowboy. Well, especially since in Hollywood, his image, as we know, is unraveled and does not represent any mystery. Here is America, Trump, the new administration, all these appointments are their cuisine, this is a dish in their pot. And the rest of the world is engaged as. There is a new Christmas tree called Trump. And all now are political scientists, experts, politicians, presidents of other states, journalists, strategists, Philistines. Everyone climbs this Christmas tree to accommodate a beautiful Christmas tree toy. I'm discussing something with Trump here, or I'm talking about Trump, or I know something intimate about Trump. And now, by the way, I can still tell you fortunes on Trump on coffee grounds. Because Trump is a really beautiful background, and against his background, any Christmas tree decoration, even not the most brilliant, sparkles and shimmers. Especially when you hang higher, everyone looks at you. You've climbed high, look, it's still a little bit to Trump, and after 25 handshakes you'll really make it. Everyone is engaged in narcissism, jubilation. And America, which is on the garden principle before everything else, willingly encourages this and will be primarily engaged in the domestic agenda. And we all expect that she will still deal with the external one.
Well, in fact, I want to discuss with you the appointment of the new leader of the Republican majority in the Senate. Now John Thune from South Dakota has been appointed. If we talk about the fact that Trump's personnel decisions, which we are talking about now, surprised the Republicans themselves, to what extent do you think this party establishment is really ready to give up, say, all these roles in the Trump cabinet and not participate in this, based on, say, the appointment of Senator John Thune? After all, we know that John Thune is a very ardent supporter of helping Ukraine. He spoke in the spring and in April voted for help to Ukraine, constantly stressing that America cannot leave the foreign policy arena, where now the main issue is still the resolution of the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Весной и в апреле голосовал за помощь Украине, все время говорит о том, что не может Америка уйти с внешнеполитической арены, где сейчас главным вопросом является все-таки разрешение российско-украинской войны.
This, of course, is encouraging, but the National Security Advisor, for example, is not going to help Ukraine. And a number of key positions imply people whom Trump has practically appointed not in favor of Ukraine, but he understands perfectly well that in addition to McDonald's, there is also Burger King. It is necessary to somehow take into account possible, at least, issues. And there must be someone in the administration who knows how to give answers to these questions. Well, for example, Thune. Why shouldn't he be? Very good. Moreover, in fact, while only Trump was climbing this Christmas tree and representing the future model of the president, he promised so much that now it really needs to be dealt with. And it did not occur to him to deal with it at the moment when he promised. He had the task of reaching the final, scoring the final last goal in the goal, winning, and after that standing on the podium with the Champions Cup. And after he perches on this very pedestal with the cup, he needs not only to shine, but also to answer for his obligations. In terms of financial matters, he is already responsible, it is evident from his appointments, and in terms of political appointments, he is preparing for the fact that he will have to resolve the issue of Ukraine, among other things. He talked so much about Ukraine, he promised so much that he would have to. He has not yet thought about Ukraine. When he promised, he didn't even really know where it was on the map. Therefore, now, of course, just in case, there should be several collected specimens of specialists who understand this issue, understand and have already somehow tasted this problem. Because you never know what you're for. But if you have known what has been happening in Ukraine in recent years, you keep an eye on this information field at least, not to mention Ukraine itself and Russia. This means that you need to be there so that you can give the right answer at any time. At least a hint, at least a hint, at least not silent. There will be more than one such person. The question is how significant they will be, and what will come after. Well, you can listen. And after you have been diagnosed, how many patients believe the doctor, and how many are offended by him? A lot of people are offended. They say I went to look for another doctor.
Trump is also going to appoint a special envoy in the near future, whose task will be to lead negotiations to end the Russian-Ukrainian war. This is a similar work that Kurt Volker did in his time in 2017 to 2019. What do you know why there was no such position under Biden, and how neutral do you think this person should be, or can we expect some surprises here too?
This is a lightning rod, because if the president directly fulfills his obligations to the electorate and gets involved in the problems of Ukraine, then he not only promised, but also, having taken it, clattering his sleeves, is responsible for failure. Therefore, there should be a special person with powers in the rank of minister. This is really such a serious problem that we appoint a special person, and he, of course, will know the issue deeply and offer the most reasonable solutions. And if he fails, then I will appoint, I am the president, I will appoint the next one. And if the next one fails, I'll appoint another one. But it's not me. That is, a specially appointed person will be responsible for my obligations to stop the war. And he should have the most autonomous, that is, he cannot be the 638th Deputy Secretary of State. He must be at least a high-ranking leader, so that the tomatoes fly only at him.
Well, that is, we cannot talk about the position yet, and, for example, about the understanding of the Trump team, what a fair world should be in general, there is also no such understanding yet.
There are a few people. There are very few of them. They are mainly in the Russian-speaking segment. They are astrologers of a very high level, graduates of the Academy of Astrology, and they are the most accurate in their forecasts today.
Okay, then let's talk about the fact that now, the current administration of the United States seems to have realized that support for Ukraine is more important than ever. And today Blinken met in Brussels with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, and Zakharova has already spoken about the incredible consequences if Ukraine is given the opportunity to strike deep into Russia with long-range weapons. Do you think the Biden administration is now aware of what is happening, the seriousness of this situation and in general how ready it is for action, or are these some kind of last impulses?
It is unlikely that there is any news for these people who are going to the reserve, because they have been watching the development of this tragedy for 2.5 years, and they know perfectly well what Ukraine needs to win, how exactly things are and to what extent Ukraine has the prospect of winning this war. There could be no news, nothing new, absolutely not a single valuable conclusion of late, and there was nowhere for it to appear. But realizing that Trump is unpredictable, and Trump, as a businessman, will just sit down at the gaming table, spread the party, and he will be ready to lose Ukraine, because what is more important is not what will happen to the country, but what will happen to the promises. He promised to end the war, he ended the war. For example, including by achieving some kind of humiliating peace from Ukraine, twisting Ukraine's arms. I didn't promise victory, I promised to stop. So I stopped. And the Biden administration is well aware that this man is really absolutely unpredictable. And in the near future, most likely, he will not deal with Ukraine, firstly, because he does not know how, and secondly, when he still gains, well, at least some understanding of the situation to take him into consideration. This means that we need to hurry and send all the money to Ukraine in the remaining 70 days, to support in absolutely all areas that are available, because there will definitely be a pause in the future. And, in general, to this day, America has not given Ukraine the opportunity to win this war, not because it is against Ukraine, not because it is for it, but because it can in no way miss Russia's defeat. Not even Putin. Country. After all, there, on this continent, somewhere in this bear tiger, there must be a certain country that is somehow trying to balance China. In this function, the buffer zone, it is quite suitable. And because of this, Ukraine cannot be allowed to defeat it. But now, because of this pause, when there will be a reappointment, now we will hand you the scepter and the orb, you will still swear on the Constitution. So far, the Biden administration, having the data and understanding exactly how wrong it is, preventing Ukraine from winning, and how this is perceived in Ukraine, in Europe, in the EU and even in Russia. It does not make up for lost time, but closes its minimum capabilities and promises so that there are no more claims later. Well, we gave you money, there were agreements. Our ministers, including Blinken, about everything that needs to be discussed. He nodded his head, smiled in the right place, shook hands. Next, we pass the baton. This is not believing in Trump. This is not believing in his position. It is no coincidence that Europe also went too far when it wanted an analog of NATO, because Trump treats NATO as a private organization. If no one pays, then it does not work, so he does not need NATO either, and Europe does not need it. And yet NATO without America and without Trump is still a weakling. To do this, you need to create your own version. And that is why Europe was not yet understood. Or maybe Kamala Harris, and she is not smart either. But Trump, he is too epic, he still looks more like Zhirinovsky. And so let's start discussing a very important issue here in Europe. Let's create our own army, because it seems that war is inevitable. And America is now unpredictable. Trump is unpredictable, so let's go America. The last tranche, the last agreements, the last obligations, the last handshake. This is alarming. This means that neither Europe nor Biden believes in Trump.
Well, Europe, in fact, European leaders do not give such signals. They are now talking about a new military strategy for NATO, and this is a military strategy without the United States, as far as I understand. Do you think that if, as you say, Ukraine can be pressured and, possibly, if they begin to negotiate with Russia, then what fate awaits Russia itself in this case? I mean ordinary people.
These people at all times lived according to the principle, if a house burns down, then you need to gird yourself and go to the neighboring village. Therefore, every time people extrapolate their idea of human life to Russia while in a normal country and try to find a society there, well, a ready-made society, and this population is probably already considered a nation with some kind of state understanding of the situation. They are very much mistaken. Because there is no public opinion in Russia, there is no society in Russia, it has not been formed. Russia is a country that turns into hatred without distinction, with slight inclusions of patriotism, when it is really hot and counts on the fact that any actions of the West will somehow affect the lives of people in Russia. This is a very high assessment. This is very complimentary for Russia. There is a Moscow Principality in Russia. In this Moscow Principality, 22 million people live directly in Moscow, although statistics do not agree with this. And about 15 million people live in the Moscow region, although statistics also do not agree with this. In total, according to official data, 147 million people live, which, of course, do not exist, because there are no more than 100 million people in Russia. But about 30 of them live in Moscow. 70 million, actually 60. This is the rest of the country. 18% of the Russian population is fed directly from the power vertical from Putin. That is, these are ministers, chauffeurs of ministers, hairdressers, mistresses. These are the restaurants, all the staff. Those in power and in purse, and those who serve this power. 18% of the population. All the rest are those who fall into the statistics of those living below the poverty line. How many packages of sanctions have been applied to Russia now? What happened to Russia? Under these sanctions, Russia now, Putin's daughter, for example, has acquired the second most powerful supercomputer on planet Earth. The world's most powerful supercomputer. In fact, he is the second, because no one really measured his position, he is not officially declared. To assemble such a computer, you need to go directly to the manufacturer of the chips, all the electronics of the processors. Processors for these supercomputers, they are not domestic. You can't pick them out of the phone with your finger. In other words, Russia ordered it directly from the Americans, because it is Intel, and said, Intel, we are making the most powerful computer, we need this configuration, these tasks, these are the parameters. These are not products that are made as consumer goods, on whom God sends, let's make 100 loaves of sausage, maybe all 100 will be bought. This is not a sausage, this is not even an impashiv, this is Fabergé. In order for a powerful supercomputer to appear in Russia in the midst of the war under sanctions, for this the customer directly contacted the contractor. In order for the Presidential Executive Office, for the FSB and the Federal Guard Service of the Russian Federation to have cars of European brands, the BMW 7, electric, i7, the latest, 24-year-old, for this, it also needs to be bought directly at the factory. In order for Mercedes dealers that have closed in Russia, every night, every evening in the yard to unload a car transporter with covered Mercedes cars that came from Europe, for this there must be direct commercial relations. And when some sanctions that do not seem to allow anything in Russia, they should cause a wave of popular anger, they should affect the livelihood of people, and ordinary people should present a bill to the authorities. These are the tolerants, these are those who agree. Yesterday I drove a German car, today I drove a Chinese car, yesterday I rode a motorcycle, today I walked, yesterday I had sausage, and today I drove only rutabagas. These are the ones who always agree. These are the ones whose teachers are always personally engaged in ballot stuffing, and then grieve that they have a small salary, that their director is a scoundrel, and that the FSB drags them for interrogations. Teachers did it with their own hands, and they did not consider it necessary to think about whether I was to blame for this. And all these people, they are always ready to tighten their belts, unlike the authorities, who will drive new BMWs and build a supercomputer for themselves, relying on the direct assistance of the United States of America. Therefore, any sanctions, restrictions, embargoes, they in no way affect the authorities in Russia. And they do not affect the people in any way, because poor people are accustomed to misery. When sociologists suddenly happened in Russia some years ago, this first appeared, there was a decent organization, and then marketing came there, depending on who studied which ruble at school. And the market study began, and they began to ask questions. But in Russia, what kind of sausage would you like? Anyone, let me eat it at last. And what kind of shampoo would you like? Are they different? And this wave of demand research, the study of certain opinions, it found that 20% of the population of the most reading country in the world did not have toothbrushes. These people simply did not brush their teeth. And when they began to pester what kind of toothpaste, they said what it was. What is toothpaste? And on it, vodka settles normally, yes, there is a stool for the rest of my life and it's fine. And when the West tries to assume that if there are still a few more sanctions, a couple more Ramsteins and their packages, especially since Korea supports and does not supply, for example, to Russia, allegedly technologies, cars, materials, Japan supports sanctions, the European Union, the United States of America also do not submit a huge number of commodity items to Russia. This will now affect the lives of the people. No, people could not afford it before. The population of the country outside the Moscow Principality did not buy iPhones. Muscovites bought, but not in Tambov. And if the Third World War happens in Syzran, then the residents of Syzran will not know about it in any way, because after they, having waited out the nuclear bombing, still go out into the street, the landscape will not change, both before the nuclear bombing and after it. And the Russian government, which is under sanctions, which for some reason receives the newest BMW 7 with FSO numbers, here it is, riding around the Kremlin, there is nowhere to get it, except directly. And there is nowhere to get supercomputers. And Russian missiles, Iskanders, killing Ukrainians, they're on the American element base. Just like the Iranian Shaheds, also on the American element base. And the processors and microcircuits there are American. But it's somehow inconvenient to talk about it, because for 2.5 years America has been throwing up its hands and saying, we don't know. But then one client called us and said, you know, I need 1,000 processors that could, for example, control drones. He asks me, are you not Russian? He says, no, listen, moms, I swear, I'm not Russian. Well, that's enough for us. Russian KAMAZ trucks, which carry equipment and weapons participating in the war in Ukraine, have a cylinder piston group produced by the American company Federal Mogul. The Federal Mogul has 5 factories in Russia, They are still working, no one has stopped it. That is, America, which says that we are for Russia, for some reason it did not stop the production of KAMAZ trucks that kill Ukrainians. And every time we talk about sanctions and economic pressure on Russia, first of all, there is no pressure, you just raise the price tag, but at the same time you continue to help Russia. America continues to help, and all civilized countries continue to help. Russia is happy to pay 3 Ns, which Russia is very solvent in this regard. The population will eventually dig up potatoes from bread to kvass. If anything, they will switch to birch bark. Not for the first time. And each time they hope that all this will form some kind of self-consciousness, some kind of public opinion and, in the end, society. Among people for whom the crisis of morality is a state doctrine, it is impossible to count on any reaction other than, wow, well, I'm going. There are no grounds. Because in Russia, you can't break your shoulder and but, my house is on the edge, what could I do alone? This is for centuries. Russia is always like this. The thaws are short-lived, the rest of the landscape is completely frozen. It is not decades, it is centuries. Because Benkendorf said 197 years ago that in Russia laws are not written for the authorities. That is, soon we will celebrate the 200th anniversary of this phrase, which summed up the result, the previous activity. Farewell, unwashed Russia, a country of slaves, a country of masters. And you, blue uniforms, and you are a loyal people to them. After all, this was also written more than 100 years ago by Lermontov. And the uniforms are not blue now, but with Vasilkov Mykolaiv, and the people still remain in the same configuration of loyalty, as well as loyalty to this third main police department, the Okhrana. Nothing changes in Russia. And when somewhere in the West they say, and then we will take away their makorka, let them smoke their samosid in this case, so they will smoke this samosid, and now we will not give them washing powders, because this is an economic sanction. So we have never washed, we have not even brushed our teeth, and we will take away their foreign cars, well, we will go on this in Chinese. These people cannot be woken up just by pinching their waist belt on one hole. They always calmly, scolding their wife and sometimes giving her in the eye, treat the policy of power for granted. Strugatsky wrote about this. Why are people in Russia always so eager to burn their liberator alive, if anything? Because they do not understand its function. Slaves understand perfectly well how they could, if they flogged their master with a pitchfork, take his place and become an even worse master. And how to become a democrat, how to become a humanitarian, how to become a pacifist, how to become a peacemaker, these people do not know. Therefore, if suddenly some Alexei Navalny comes to them, then they hate this Alexei Navalny, they support his minority, and the majority hates him. And the West, which says, look, here it is a leader, so is it a leader for how many percent? Not even for 18. These are 18 completely different, very strong percent, for 3%, for 4%. And the West, with all its methods of awakening the consciousness of society, is absolutely past Russia. Russia is not receptive to this. And Russia, this is a country that is outside, if it is somehow possible to reach it, will gladly accept, for example, a loaf of bread from someone else's hand and eat it. America at all times, we remember that it came to any famine and saved a hungry Russia, always remaining a friend, even now, supporting not so much with bread as with Iskander microcircuits and processors. But she can't do more. The American is looked at with envy, the American is looked at with trepidation and hatred, as well as on any other who is better. And they are absolutely closed. And in order to understand, comprehend and put on your teeth, there is no tool for this from abroad, it will not work.
If such processes are taking place in Russia, then what is the Russian opposition fighting for now?
If, as Warren said, we have to make good out of evil, because there is nothing else to make it of. He received the Nobel Prize for this phrase, which included a whole novel, because it concerns not so much Russia, it concerns all of humanity. Humans are very imperfect. If civilization, for example, ended, then it would not be a pity. Because cats, for example, are better than people, and dogs are better than people. Humans are the most unfortunate thing that has come out of evolution. But every time things are hopeless, and when, well, the same with North Korea, it's better to isolate them from the rest of the world. There's no appeasement. A chimera crawls out of there, which is only more terrifying. And the opposition is fighting not to abandon people. Because in the concentration camp, in the Gulag in 1937, books were written, poems were written, science was moving. And Timofey Frysovsky approached Solzhenitsyn in transit and said, "Hello, I am the chairman of our scientific community here, in the transit camp. What topic would you be ready to make a presentation on? We have reports on scientific topics on such and such days. All these people need to be helped. All these people need to be consolidated and supported. And the opposition, which, for example, goes to a rally in Berlin, can it make any impression on Berlin? No. Can it really help people who, for example, stayed in Russia, who understand, want to, but can't, because they are behind the curtain, because they are in the Gulag? Yes, because support is very important. This visualization is ineffective. When you go out against the riot police with a flag, with a banner, with your conscience, you end up in prison, or you are killed, well, or you were forgiven for the first time, but it seems so to you. You haven't achieved anything. No, you did, because when both you and him, a few more came out and showed. The more terrible the authorities, the stronger the opposition. These gestures, they never lead to a result immediately. And we came out here, and we won, and the riot police fled. No, the riot police did not run away. But this is very important. It is very important that always, nearby, somewhere, at the moment abroad, there are people who are for you, who are trying to negotiate with the whole world on your behalf. You are deprived of such an opportunity, you remained in the Gulag. But even outside the Gulag, the world must know what is happening. The world must understand who is right and who is wrong, who needs help, who does not, who should be condemned for what, who and how to support. And the opposition is engaged like people who have found themselves free, someone through a torture chamber who has broken free. These are the only ones who can tell, show and explain what is happening so that the West understands, and with their actions reassure those who did not break out and are likely to die in Russia in the near future. Russia is not monochrome in this regard. Not all are grey, not all thugs, not all are for Putin, not all of the 18% who directly benefit from him, first of all, material benefits. And in Russia during the Gulag, in the darkest, most monstrous, most terrible times, under the Tsars, under serfdom, nevertheless, there was always an intelligentsia, there were raznochenцы, there were revolutionaries, there were poets, there were satirists, there were people who did not agree with the authorities. Where did they come from? Well, how are you? A well-fed nobleman, why on earth do you allow yourself, among other things, the uprising of the Decembrists? And that's it. It would seem that there is nowhere for them to come from. No, there is where they come from. In particular, because they have support, because there is genetics. Why in a family that does not have any predisposition to the appearance of an intelligent person, nevertheless, he grows up. There is such an old genetic example. Family, parents are alcoholics, lumpens, patients with all sexually transmitted diseases that there are. There are 5 children in this family, and now the mother is pregnant with the 6th. Do you see what the point is? If someone were allowed to make decisions for this family, to deprive them of parental rights in order to kill a child before he is born, because it will be easier this way, it would be simply fascism. And no one could have predicted that this child would grow up to be Beethoven, that his family would play such an important role in history. Rejection of such a child is like someone saying that it is not worth giving these people a chance, because they cannot unite, cannot agree. The opposition can quarrel, argue, and, yes, they don't have much power. But this is the very light, the very periscope of the submarine, which does not look into the dark abyss, but seeks the light. And this light, perhaps, will someday become visible to others, to those who are now at the bottom, in their metal barrel seal forever.
Тот самый над подводной лодкой кусочек перископа, который смотрит не туда, в пучину морскую, а сюда, где свет. И этот свет видит и позволяет этот свет увидеть другим, тем, кто там на дне морском, тем, кто вот в этой металлической бочке запаяны, может быть, навсегда.
Sergei, I am very grateful to you for this conversation, for the fact that we are ending it on such a rather optimistic note. As for me, I would like to remind our viewers that Sergei ASLANYAN, a journalist and host of the Khodorkovsky Life program, was with me on the stream today. Thank you very much.
Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes.